My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Jess Spera. It's June 8th, 2023. We're at Chehalem Vineyards in Newberg. Jess, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
First question to get started is why wine?
So I originally was in the brewing industry, and it's a very long story, but ultimately I thought the wine industry was a similar industry to go into. I had a lot of lab experience in the brewing industry, and it was just more aligned with who I am as a person. I had a lot of interest in wine, coming from also a bartending and serving. I worked at a lot of fine dining restaurants, so I had a lot of knowledge about wine before I started even in the brewing industry.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the first wine that I ever served from Oregon was Chehalem. I think it was a Three Vineyards Chardonnay. I think that was the SKU. But so there's more like upward mobility in the wine industry as well. A little bit more lucrative than the brewing industry. More women. So yeah, it was an easy and also natural transition. I had some connections as well to a winery in California that, so I did my first harvest in California.
Let's talk about life before wine a little bit. Tell us where you were born and raised and kind of life before wine. So
I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. I lived in a town about 30 minutes outside of downtown Boston. So grew up in New England and decided to go to college in Colorado and have a double degree in history and anthropology. Instead of moving from Colorado after college, I was supposed to be working at a museum in New Hampshire, but I never got on the airplane and I stayed in Colorado and just started waiting tables instead. I didn't want to leave. So I ended up living there for 15 years. And in that time when I was serving and bartending, I started to go back to school and started taking chemistry, biology. So I have about 40 credits. I don't have a degree in either one of those, but the goal was to get a degree in a master's in nutrition, become a dietitian. Which didn't happen. Do you want to hear that story?
Please do.
Okay. So I had taken all the chemistry, microbiology, organic chemistry, and I took physiology, and we started to have labs where we were dissecting things. There was a very unfortunate lab that involved a live rat, and some epinephrine, and it was awful, and I hated it. I had to take anatomy the next semester, and I was really dreading it because I knew what that meant, a lot of labs with body parts and things like that. And one night I got a call from a friend late at night who had gotten a really bad bike accident, and he needed a ride to the hospital. So I picked him up, and I was in worse shape than him because I was so sick from all the blood, and he had kind of mangled his face. And I took him to the hospital. The next day, we were out having breakfast, reliving the night. And I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I can't do anatomy. I can't do it. And he said that he had a friend that was hiring in a lab at Boulder Beer. So they had a pretty big microbiology lab, and they ran enzymatic tests and things like that. So instead of going and taking anatomy and continuing my education, I started working at the brewery. And then the rest is what I told you before, but yeah.
So let's talk about, before we pick that up, I'm curious about, you mentioned kind of fine dining and that area. So tell me about starting to learn about wine as well as beer and spirits. What were you interested in them? Was it something that was a passion of yours at that point, or was it just sort of a means to get by?
Yeah, no, so I had worked at a brewery right out of college, waiting tables. It was not fine dining, it was very casual. They had a brewery in the back of the restaurant, and while I was working there, I always showed an interest in learning about the beer, and I became friends with the brewers, and they would let me, I would never get paid for it, but jump in back there and help them out. for a few days. So I did always have this like interest in manufacturing beverages, and I really like the science aspect to it, as well as, you know, all the different choices you can make to affect the flavors and typicity of the beer. So I hadn't done anything with that really, and then kept moving up, doing more fine dining and bartending, and started learning more about wine. And it was a necessity for sure, because that's how you get the tips, is you have to sell the good wine. So a lot of wine education, took a lot of classes, nothing formal, nothing like the WSET or anything, but we would do you know, group learning sessions as a restaurant. Sometimes restaurants would require you to write a paper or whatever. It was just like, yeah, so it was years of that, you know, learning about wine. And I would say that probably knew more then about wine outside the Willamette Valley than I do now, because we're so focused on what we do here. But yeah, it was a great gateway to what I do now.
So let's talk about that. You get to Boulder Beer, and now you're you're working in the lab for a large brewer. So tell us about that experience and about being kind of back into that after being on the fine dining side.
Yeah, so it was interesting. It was very casual work environment. I was the only girl in the entire building. I was very protected in my lab. I didn't often go out of the lab maybe to pull a sample or whatever, but it wasn't a very female-friendly work environment. I think it's changed a lot now. The brewing industry is more women working in brewing, but at the time, I think this was, I don't know, 13 years ago or something like that. So 10 years ago, 10 years. But yeah, so it could be better, but it was just like not a very hospitable place. But yeah, I was happy to be there every day just to learn.
So tell us about making the decision then to do wine and to try a harvest. And how did that kind of progress in your mind, and how did you actually end up doing a harvest?
I don't really think about things, I just do them. So when someone came to me, hey, my friend is a winemaker at this winery, you could do a harvest there, it was an immediate yes. From there, actually, he was a great mentor, the winemaker there, and helped me get really great jobs in New Zealand and Australia as well. And then that led to talking to Win Peterson Nedry, and I worked here in 2016 as an intern.
So let's talk about the first harvest experience. What did you know about what you were getting into before you got into it?
So I signed on sort of as their lab person. That wasn't particularly difficult for me. There's actually a lot more intricate tests and things that you have to do in beer because the pH is a lot higher, so they're a lot more susceptible to bugs and things like that. But a lot of cleaning. I remember I had to use a wrench for like the first time in my life, and I was so awkward. So I guess that was sort of a shock to me. I was, nervous. Was I ever going to figure out how to use tools or be handy? That is not a problem anymore. But I remember specifically using a wrench for the first time. What
else about the first experience for you? What did you think of the actual work being done during harvest?
I thought it was pretty awesome. It was very different from beer. You're not worried about contamination as much or oxygen pickup during harvest specifically. So I asked a lot of questions, and I was pretty much down for anything. They took a picture of me with a squeegee in my hand, I think was like the intern picture of me, and that was pretty accurate. I just was always squeegeeing and trying to clean and everything like that. So, it was my first harvest. I did not know what was going on.
So what about it made you want to keep doing it?
There's like some travel aspects that I really wanted to experience. The opportunity to go live in Australia or New Zealand for a few months was really appealing. While I was working at Boulder Beer, I was also working still at the restaurant, and I really wanted to stop. I think I was 30 when I went to New Zealand. So I was 29 when I went to Australia. It was about time. I had been doing that for a long time, and I was, kind of over it. So
let's talk about those travels then. Where was the first place you went?
I went to Australia in 2015. And I also signed on as their lab person there, but I was starting to get more cellar experience, more comfortable with pumps and the whole process in general. I was in the Mornington Peninsula, which is a really small wine region, right outside of Melbourne. I was the only intern, and I think we did like 500 tons, so it was busy. But it was great. Like, I got thrown into it.
How did it compare to what you'd already done?
So yeah, the other winery, I think we did 70 tons, so it was, busier. More industrial, but like still premium. They kind of had to be because they had the team about the size of we do at Chehalem. They were doing about 500 tons. So it was, busy. We talked more about, you just kind of dig in more your second harvest. You talk more about clones, or, you start recognizing numbers in the lab and correlating with, quality and things like that. So started to do that. Yeah.
Then what came next?
Then I went to New Zealand at Craggy Range. And that was a really different experience for me. So also premium, they did 2,500 tons, but they also hired, I think there was 10 interns. So it was the first experience I had with other interns, and sort of my first introduction to other people that like really cared about wine and were learning as well. So, we did day trips and tasted at other wineries, like really interested in education and learning about the region, whereas I didn't really get that experience in the other 2 harvests I had because I was the only intern at both wineries. At Craggy Range, they really take pride in their intern program, and they do a lot of games and learning activities before harvest starts. They have this mentality, they kind of just set you loose. So there's a lot of opportunities to learn and just kind of figure it out yourself. And so I learned a lot there in terms of like logistics and how things need to go. And I was on nighttime press crew, so there was no manager there. It was just us, like truck and trailers like backed up down the road, and we're just constantly processing Sauvignon Blanc 2 presses at a time, like 2 40-ton presses at a time. So it was fun. I was sleepy.
You talked about being kind of thrown in. I'm curious, were there any interesting kind of lessons learned or moments there when you felt like you were kind of on your own to make a hard decision?
So, I feel like I kind of thrive in those really, really busy times. So I would say that if anything, those instances where you have to make game time decisions, or you're really busy and you really need to like think about 5 steps ahead, those are extremely gratifying to me and propel me forward. So, I could go all day making as long as we're not slow, can really propel me forward. Yeah.
So after those experiences, what were you sort of thinking about as sort of goals, or what you wanted to do next?
So that winemaker in California, who was a really great mentor, I remember talking to him, and we kind of made a 5-year plan. And I said, okay, I'm gonna do a few harvests abroad, try to get a full-time job in Oregon, and then 5 years become an assistant winemaker. And that, I think I beat it by a year. So I did it in 4 years. So I think it's really important to have those kinds of goals for yourself.
So why Oregon?
It's a similar vibe as Colorado. There's great outdoor spaces here, and I love hiking and the ocean and skiing and stuff like that. So also the price of living here is a little bit more reasonable, and the fire danger is maybe less, but up to be determined. Yeah.
So with that kind of goal in mind after New Zealand, what was your next step towards getting to Oregon?
Wynn did a harvest at Craggy Range. So Matt Stafford, who's the winemaker there, knew her. And I asked him, I always ask, what do you think I should do next? Just trying to get any recommendation. I feel like it's better to get a job on a recommendation than just blindly apply. So he set me up with Wynn, and then we had a short interview when I was hired here for 16.
Talk about your first impressions of Oregon and of the industry here.
I really liked it. This was a Kush. 16 was a Kush harvest here. I think they were maybe a little low on fruit. There was 5 interns here for 200 tons, so a little bit different than Craggy Range. We lived in this house, that 100-year house up there, and we partied a lot. We can take that out. But yeah, we really socialized with other interns in Oregon, and so I got to know a lot of people really quickly here, which was beneficial, I think, in the end. It was easy to move here because within a couple months I had a good group of friends.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the wines here?
I really liked them. I was really, at the time when I was kind of doing harvests and things like that, I really loved unoaked Chardonnay, loved it. So we made Enox here, so I was interested in that. And it was kind of my first introduction to Riesling. Yeah, and I had never done native at the time. They were doing native ferments here, so that was interesting to see. Mm-hmm. So yeah, good. Yeah.
So then after the 2016 harvest, how did you end up finding that full-time job you were looking for?
So I was frantically looking because I think I was a little naive. At the time, it maybe was harder to find a full-time job here than it is now. There's a little bit more of a worker shortage, but so Domaine Serene had posted a job for a cellar hand, and Katie knew Vince Vidrine, who was the associate winemaker there at the time. And so I got in a couple interviews there, and they hired me there. They took a very long time to get back to me, and I had a job set up at the Allison waiting tables, and they were going to have me be a server assistant, which I was not thrilled about because of my years of experience, but I was going to do it. And then the day I was supposed to start, I called Vince and I said, do I have the job or not? I really don't want to go to this first shift. And he said, yes, but we're just working on the final paperwork. So I called up the Allison and told them that I wasn't going to come to I was really happy about that. I didn't want to go. Yeah.
So tell us about Domaine Serene.
Yeah, that was great. So quickly after I started, I was the only cellar hand, 40 or 45,000 cases at the time. So I was running around crazy all the time, every single day. Really taught me a lot. It really threw me in because I had never worked a full year in a winery. I really didn't know what I was doing. I had to learn how to filter really quickly. I did all the rack, every single barrel that was racked in that place from 16, 17, 18 I did. So yeah, I was really thrown into it there.
What did you think of wine work in the non-harvest season? What did you think about the rest of the year?
I like it because, like I said, I get that sort of thrill from everything working out and the logistics. And it was a little bit of a fight, I think, but I really wanted them to let me kind of schedule my own week and say, okay, these are the goals. This is how I'm going to do it. because I was good at thinking 5-10 steps ahead. So in terms of cellar work. So that was my forte. We tried to sort of get me to learn other aspects like lab, but there was like really never any time, so I was very cellar focused. But that was okay. I had a lot of lab experience before, but.
How long did it take you to feel sort of comfortable in that role?
Like not that long, because I mean, I was again really thrown into it, but maybe like 4 months.
So what came next after Domaine Serene?
Yeah, 18, I had a great harvest there. I met my husband came. He was not my husband at that time, but we fell in love that harvest. And so Katie offered me the job during harvest of 18, and I didn't even really have to think about it. I said okay, because I just didn't really see any upward movement at Serene for me. And Chehalem, because of the history that I had with him and the harvest I did, and I remember working here in 2016, and there was a sort of family party. It was a barbecue. The Stoller family was there, and I was like, this is just such a nice place to work. Like, I really liked the culture. So it was an easy yes for me. And then, yeah, I married my husband. I left my husband there. He worked there for a couple of years, and we got married shortly after the harvest of 2018.
So when you came back to Chehalem, what was the role you were stepping into?
I got hired as assistant winemaker.
Assistant winemaker.
Yeah.
So for you, did you feel like you were ready for that role?
I know there was some growing to do, and Katie really allowed me time to do that. And I do feel that my role has ever evolved since I started working here 4 years ago. Yeah.
What were the biggest learning curves?
I guess looking at ads. It's so hard to explain because really my role has evolved, I think. But I think in the beginning, just learning numbers and additions and working on the database. And once I got that down, I think Katie and I started to look at some of the practices that were instituted here and started talking and doing a lot of research. And so I started working on that. And then we started implementing some changes in the winemaking process.
You mentioned your role evolving, so tell us how it has evolved.
So I would say when I first started here, I probably was just kind of a glorified cellar hand until I was able to master some of the numbers and things like that. At the time I had been going to school. I did the UC Davis extension program, so I was finishing that up, which was helpful when you're doing school and also getting real world experience at the same time. It's really the best way to do it, I think. Because everything you can see in real time. Now I'm more part of the planning and minute details of winemaking and more part of decisions, tastings and things like that. Katie and I trust each other to bounce ideas off of, whereas before it was, more of a one-sided. But I think we're just working together. Yeah.
So I'm curious about that. You mentioned kind of thriving in the situations where you're kind of thrown into things. So tell me about the sort of confidence to make those decisions or to offer that kind of input for those decisions. How long did it take you to feel like you could do that?
Yeah. I think in the last maybe year and a half, I felt more comfortable in my skin and more comfortable to make decisions and things like that, just because I do have now almost 10 years of experience in the wine industry, and just always working on continual education about, why are we doing this thing that we're doing? So we just always want to think about that. It's not, oh, well, it's because we've always done it, or that's how winemakers do it in Oregon. It's why are we doing this? Is it worth it? Is it really benefiting our wine? And because we've delved into so many aspects of the winemaking and done a lot of trials here. I feel like I can back up a lot of the things that I say.
So tell me about how you would describe then the Chehalem sort of winemaking or wine style, and sort of what your influence is on that.
Yeah, so I think we are just very, very intentional with everything that we do. With every procedure that we do, or with every thing we do to the wine or action we do to the wine, we can back it up with a reason why. For the most part, I think we want to let the vineyard speak, because we have these 4 great vineyards that are all very different from each other, so we want to make sure that they shine well in the single vineyards. So not too much manipulation, but we are focused on quality and making sure that the wine is clean.
So obviously in 2018, as you were being on here, sort of coming under the Stoller umbrella of the larger wine group. So tell me about how that kind of relationship works with, you're making wine on site, but also have a director of winemaking who's off site.
I think it's great. We have so many great production people that work between the 3 wineries that there's always somebody to bounce ideas off of. So the production winery, the reserve winery, and Chehalem. Yeah. And when we get together, it's very unassuming, and if we do like big group tastings, it's really easy to talk to everyone about, different wines, and we all seem to be kind of aligned in ethos as well, even though our wineries are really different. And there's always something to be learned from someone else. So I think it's nothing but positive, really.
Talk a bit about your sort of experiences in 2020. We've been looking back at 2020 and all the challenges of that year, both from a pandemic perspective and obviously a harvest perspective. So tell me about your memories of that year and sort of the biggest challenges you had to face.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges for me, yes, the smoke, but from a hiring standpoint, there was not a lot of, that's when, it's harder to get interns now. That year was especially hard to get quality interns. And, you feel sort of bad because these interns are coming for an experience, and then this great catastrophe hits, and no one is in a great mood about it. And I think their experience for sure suffered because of that. I think, there are ways we can combat smoke, and if we're realistic about things, then you just have to, you just need to put your head down and deal with it.
Is there anything you took away from that year that you're sort of carrying with you as you're either looking for hiring or sort of looking at the climate?
I don't know what I can do about the climate. I think there were tactics. We learned, what are the best tactics for treating smoke taint, and hopefully we can just go straight to that instead of. We did a lot of trials that year, and we found out a lot of things do not work. So hopefully we can just skip that part and go straight to what we know for sure is the right answer. Mm-hmm. For hiring. Now I start early. I start in December looking for people for fall, and that has worked out really well. You can get really quality applicants with people who are planning ahead. Mm-hmm. So might as well just start as early as possible. And also, that year we started taking on interns a second harvest. So I usually will start planting seeds in their brain. You can always come back again. So this year we have one intern that's coming back for her 3rd harvest. So I think it'll probably be her last harvest. And I think there's always something to learn at the same place again. You can, like I said, kind of dig in, get more details than just surface details about the winery. And she is actually going to be part of our blending groups this year. And I think that is something that no other intern is probably has access to. So
as you've grown into the role of assistant winemaker, tell me now, kind of as you're sort of feeling like you're comfortable in it, what do you feel the biggest, sort of the main role of an assistant winemaker is?
Just sort of a jack of all trades. I think you can jump in wherever. One of the big ones is to try to facilitate trials and make sure that we are sticking to, the higher plan that Katie has made. So making sure that everything is getting done in the cellar, our equipment is all up to spec, and PMs are done. Hiring out interns for the next year, and just assisting Katie, like literally assistant winemaker, in whatever she needs to get done. And a lot of planning, and we plan and schedule everything, every meeting. So when a decision needs to be made, we make the decision, and then we can move on to the next steps. And I think that's really important in the overall workings of the winery to make things go smoothly.
So you mentioned that Oregon was a draw for you, not just for the wine, but for sort of the environment and the place. So tell me about, as you've been in Oregon, how have you sort of seen the wine industry change and grow up, and what are maybe some of the differences in the industry now versus when you came in?
I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I got here in 2016, but maybe it was more grassroots back then. I don't know. Obviously there were more family-run wineries, and now things are starting to be bought by bigger companies. Pay scale has changed a lot, which for the better, because of that, I think. They can afford to pay their employees more. I mean, it had to happen because you couldn't afford to live here otherwise. But.
And what about what comes next for the Oregon wine industry?
Such a hard question. Yeah, I think I like the idea of us getting more recognition. New York Times said that Willamette Valley was like the next Napa Valley. I like that direction. For us, I think that's only going to bring more money, better infrastructure to the area, better pay. So I am hoping that it goes in that direction. Maybe we scale it up a little bit.
So we saw something about your interest in getting younger generations interested in wine and the environment. So tell us about that.
I think a lot of that is education. We have to have younger people and more diverse people drinking wine in order for us to hire more of them. So, focusing on marketing towards younger people is probably the first step, trying to get them to drink wine, which is, it's kind of typically an old person's drink at this point. So, I don't know. I'm not in marketing, so I don't know.
What are you sort of your kind of accomplishments so far? What are you proudest of, or what do you look back on sort of most fondly?
I think working here at Chehalem and the relationship that I have with Katie and what we've done here is really the best accomplishment. And sometimes we talk about we don't think this would ever happen again. We are part of this great company, but we're also separate here in Newberg, not in Dayton. And we really have sort of free reign to try things and do what we want with very little input, as long as we're doing a good job. So I think this is a very unique situation that we have here, and we don't take that for granted.
Mm-hmm. And what are you looking ahead to in the future for yourself, either personal basis or professionally?
For a little bit, done with upward movement for now. We're going to start a family, so we're excited about that, and Jay and I are focusing on that right now. Professionally, I could see myself in a couple of years growing my role a little bit more. I don't know what that would entail really, but we'll see. Open to anything. Just be open.
Any plans on making your own wine at some point?
No. I don't want to sell it.
All right. That's all the questions that I
Okay.
have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover that you'd like to cover today?
I don't think so.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much
Okay.
for your time, sharing the space with us today, and sharing your story with us. And we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Okay.
Thank you.